Welcome everyone to the Blood Red Morning Bulletin. I'm your host David Comerford, and today we're going to be getting into a few transfer stories that have emerged. Obviously, the season's over now. We're into kind of the early days of the window. And first of all, Ben, we'll talk about the Barcelona defender Jules Kounde. Liverpool have been linked with him. I mean, before we get into the fit and maybe the viability of the move, I mean, what do you think of the player himself? Is it a story that should sort of excite Liverpool fans if indeed there are legs in it?
Well, it's an interesting one. Obviously, there were reports a few days ago in Barcelona papers, Catalan papers, that Kounde was unhappy at Barcelona and that he would be open to a move. Then Kounde came out on Twitter and denied it. He said that those reports are not true. Then Xavi addressed it recently in his press conference. We kind of made an illusion that he's happy with him. He didn't say 100% that Kounde is going to stay, which I think was interesting. And he said that obviously Kounde would prefer to play in a centre back position, whereas at Barcelona, Xavi has been using him in the fullback role. And in that same press conference, he was asked about Ansu Fati potentially leaving, and he said, "You never know. I think any player could leave Barcelona at this point because of the financial fair play rules and everything." So it's almost like he hasn't he has kind of opened a little bit of room for Liverpool to make this move, and I think it's a move that right now in this new Liverpool system would really work well.
Well, we'll get onto that in a second. I thought, it was interesting to see it come up. I mean, Kounde, I think, was very close to joining Chelsea not that long ago. Chelsea really thought they were going to get him, and then obviously he's playing for Barcelona instead. And I mean, the key piece of context was with Barcelona is they're somehow trying to, reduce their wage bill and bring in probably the highest paid player in world football in Lionel Messi. So there are going to be maybe some big names that leave the new camp this summer. The one thing with Kounde, I mean, you mentioned it off air there, Ben, about how he's got this preference to play centre back. He's been used as a right back, so maybe not kind of ideal for Liverpool in that sense. Because I look at the links with him, the links with Timber, and think, do we read into the fact that Liverpool are looking at basically centre backs who can play as a fullback? I mean, we saw Timber kind of defending on sort of the right of a three at the World Cup, so maybe not quite fullback, but certainly someone who can kind of start on the flank and then tuck in as Trent Alexander-Arnold obviously moves into midfield as Robertson pushes up, and then to form that more natural three, maybe instead of Robertson doing it. Do you think that Liverpool will bring in kind of a centre-back, full-back hybrid who can kind of readjust that back three system a little bit and move Trent into midfield full-time, if that makes sense?
It seems like it based on the links. For me, I think if Liverpool are going to bring in a centre back, my personal preference would be a left-footed player who can play on the left side, cover for Van Dijk. Obviously, Kounde isn't necessarily that, but he has played on the left side, so he could potentially also do that, which is why I think he would be such a good fit, because he's got all these hybrid roles that he can play. He can switch over to the left, play there. I think he's done it for Sevilla a few times. Then obviously he can play fullback. He probably won't be happy doing that week in, week out, but that's another position. And I think as well, what is interesting is you mentioned the use of a back three potentially. I think Kounde could also really suit that. He's someone who likes to advance into midfield positions, so not necessarily the most defensive centre back. He does like to make runs forward, but I think in a back three, even with Trent Alexander's Arnold's new role, there is still bigger room and room for Kounde to potentially, go forward into these advanced positions and almost create a double pivot with Alexander Arnold. And I think there's definitely room for him and roles for him that he could play at Liverpool. And I think just in terms of his playing style, he's got really good recovery speed. Obviously, very comfortable on the ball, which is why Xavi has used him in a fullback position. I think those kind of aspects make him very suited to Liverpool. Obviously, I think height-wise, there is a bit of a concern. I mean,
Mm,
obviously, when you're coming to the Premier League, he's quite short. I think he's either 6 foot or just under 6 foot.
mm,
So, if you look at the other sort of profiles of Liverpool centre backs, I think the shortest is Joe Gomez at 6'2".
mm.
Um, he would be different in that sense. But if you've got Van Dijk and Konate around you, then you probably wouldn't have to rely on, being aerially powerful.
Yeah, Van Dijk and Konate. I think I saw it looked the other day at sort of two of the most aerially dominant centre backs in the Premier
Exactly.
League.
Yeah.
But when you look at the stats, and I suppose people have raised similar concerns about Jurriën Timber. He's obviously, I think he's about sort of 5'9", 5'10", and then people would look at kind of Lisandro Martinez and think, is he kind of an example of how you can maybe use, I suppose, your kind of in-game intelligence to compensate for that kind of physical limitation. But yeah, I definitely think that Liverpool do bring in a centre back. It is going to be someone who has the versatility to kind of not just cover for Van Dijk and Konate, but also operate within this system as well, and in one of the full-back roles. In terms of the Kounde thing, maybe we'll find ourselves in a bit of a Frankie de Jong situation here, where Barcelona's almost trying to offload him because he is quite a lucrative asset, but maybe he just doesn't want to go. So we'll see how that one pans out. Let's move on to Fabio Carvalho now. He's reportedly been the subject of a bid from an unnamed Champions League club, and it's looking like there's a possibility that he might leave Liverpool not only on loan, as was suggested by Klopp in his press conference before Southampton, but potentially on a permanent transfer. I mean, we'll talk about the merits of selling him in a second, but how surprised are you, Ben, that we're seeing these reports only a year on his arrival? And does it make the deals just seem a little bit confusing in hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in hindsight, the deal is very confusing, but I'm not surprised at all about these links. I did, when Carvalho joined, I did a few interviews with his sort of people close to him, his academy coaches and whatnot. And I think what stood out to me is he's a very confident character and a very ambitious character as well. He's talked about in the past winning the Ballon d'Or and being one of the best players in the world. So I don't think I never thought for once that he's going to be satisfied with the amount of minutes he's played. I think he's just had one start in 2023, a few very short cameos against Real Madrid, and I think it was Man City or Man United maybe in the Premier League. I can't remember, but yeah, very brief cameos. He's not going to be satisfied with that. He'll want to play. He's still very young, and I think it makes sense for him to go as well. He doesn't seem to be in Liverpool's plans. Personally, I don't think it should be a permanent transfer. I think right now it doesn't make sense for Liverpool to let go of him so soon.
Mm,
But then again, it also comes down to the player's preference. Maybe he'll think if you go on loan, you're not never going to be as favoured by wherever you go. I mean, a little bit of dip in form or someone else in your position doing well who's on a permanent contract, that means they'll be probably ahead of you in the pecking order. So maybe he's looking at it in that sense that's why he would want a permanent transfer and to make sure he has the most amount of minutes possible and the best possible future ahead of him as well.
So in terms of not selling him straight away, do you think it's a better idea to, if he isn't going to be part of Liverpool's plans, to loan him out and allow him basically to raise his transfer value to the point where, if you want to then sell him next summer, you'll be able to get quite a bit more for him than you would at this point?
Yeah, I think for Liverpool that makes the most sense. Or if he has an incredible season, then there might even be a conversation about integrating him back into the
Mm.
first team. But like I said, it also comes down to the player himself and what he wants and his preference. And if he feels like he's not going to be given as much of an opportunity if he's only there on loan at wherever he goes. Then I think Liverpool will also have to respect that and grant him his wish.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Klopp sometimes doesn't want to stand in the way of players, and he spoke very glowingly, to be fair, about Carvalho. So maybe there'll be just a feeling of allow him to kind of launch his career a bit more elsewhere. But yeah, we'll see how that one unfolds. As certainly one of the early stories of transfer, and they're probably not one that we expected to be focusing on so much as well. But we were going to finish the stream by talking about Adrian kind of committing his future to Liverpool, but there's actually been some sort of breaking news while we've been on air. Jörg Schmatke, I think hopefully I'm saying that right, has been confirmed as Liverpool's sporting director. I think it's just going to be on a short-term deal originally. I mean, just initial reaction to that one, Ben, obviously coming in for what is a crucial summer for the club.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people when he first kind of emerged were not very happy with his name. Wolfsburg are not the biggest team in the Bundesliga, but I think, people talk about, he sold Victor Osimhen for, a few £1 million. I think it was 3 million euros or something like that. But I think overall, I think he's a really good sporting director, just a very solid person who can deliver results, and he's delivered results at Wolfsburg. I mean, when he took over at Wolfsburg, they were fighting for relegation 2 seasons in a row. He took over, and in a few years' time, they were in the Champions League group stages. And it's been thanks to him being able to operate with limited finances and finding a lot of under the radar talent that might not have moved on yet from Wolfsburg. Some have. I mean, some are playing in the Premier League or other top clubs, but mostly there's still a lot of good potential and good young talent at Wolfsburg, and the team that he has built is, I think, a really good team. And I think overall, yeah, I didn't get the negative sentiment around him. I think he's a solid appointment. Clearly, he seems to be on good terms with Jurgen Klopp as well. And I think every sporting director is going to make mistakes. So I think people should stop highlighting him selling Victor Osimhen, because Liverpool sold Taiwo Avoni and for pennies, and then Union Berlin sold him for quadruple that amount to Nottingham Forest, and obviously Avoni has done very well at Forest since then. So and that was under Michael Edwards, and I think Edwards himself has had a few blunders in his time. I think it's just the nature of football. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes. But I think overall Schmatke's record speaks for itself. He's done very well at Wolfsburg, and I you'd hope he's going to be working under kind of limited finances, or not as limited as it was at Wolfsburg, but by the standards of the Premier League, fairly limited. You'd hope that he could deliver similar results, even if it's just on a short-term deal as well.
Yeah, obviously he has the incentive individually to kind of earn that longer stay and that longer role at Liverpool because of the short-term nature of his contract. And yeah, you mentioned about being able to work with limited funds. Obviously, that's kind of a skill that I'll be able to kind of carry from his previous roles. But this one is a new challenge for him too, in the sense of building a squad that can compete for the biggest trophies. So yeah, we'll judge him on how Liverpool do this summer. And we'll see if the appointment proves to be inspired or a little bit sort of maybe on the bizarre side. So yeah, we'll withhold our sort of verdict on that one for a few months now. But thanks very much, Ben, for joining me. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with another stream. In the meantime, remember to check out all the written content that goes out on liverpool.com today. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.